Hi, my name is Dr. Catherine Hughes from Crime Psych. I'm a criminal psychologist and I run a business that enables me to bring knowledge and learning to everyone, not just those at universities, schools or colleges. And I do this by producing a range of blogs, vlogs and free online courses, but I also run slightly more in-depth courses, both available online and face-to-face. You don't need any previous qualifications to learn with me. There are several subjects available, so once you've finished watching this video, head on over to my website and have a look at some of the subjects that are available. This particular video is looking at how being raped affects a person. There are both the physical and psychological effects which can last a lifetime. Some people can cope relatively well and others will have post-traumatic stress for a lifetime following the incident. Before I go on to talk about the effects of rape, I'll read you the official definition of rape. Rape is when a person intentionally penetrates another's vagina, anus or mouth with a penis without the other person's consent. A rape can occur with or without violence. The most important aspect of rape is consent. Just because a person doesn't say no doesn't mean that they consent. They may be frozen in fear. They may be incapacitated by alcohol or by drugs. Or they may have been coerced or forced into it. I sincerely hope many of you have no idea what it's like to be raped. For those of you that do, I honestly hope that you're getting the help and support that you need. 20% of women and 4% of men have experienced some type of sexual assault since the age of 16. Approximately 85,000 women and 12,000 men aged between 16 and 59 experience rape, attempted rape or sexual assault by penetration in England and Wales alone. That's roughly 11 per hour. However, only around 15% of those who experience sexual violence ever report that to the police. The most common type of rape is where the victim knows the offender. Approximately 90% of those who are raped know the perpetrator prior to the offence. Conviction rates for rape are far lower than for other crimes, with only 5.7% of reported rape cases ending in a conviction. What message do you think that sends out to citizens? Do you think a rapist would fear getting caught and convicted? Do you think that they'd even be given a suitable sentence for their crime? No, neither do I. The way authorities view, treat, convict and sentence a particular crime influences the way society thinks about it. Channel 4's programme called To Catch a Sex Offender featured a Crown Prosecution Service lawyer who was slammed by viewers as victim blaming as her comments on the women's skirt and drinking in August caused absolute outrage. Sophie Stevens from the CPS said, "We're fully aware that there are some myths and stereotypes. If you're a member of the jury and as a woman you think, well, that won't ever happen to me and it won't ever happen to me because I don't wear short skirts, I don't drink too much." She went on to say, unfortunately, it does become a matter of credibility and reliability. And in a lot of our cases, we've got a girl who's been drinking, who's been out, who's met a man and has had sex. But that opens her up to being questioned about her lifestyle and her attitudes. This type of thinking is essentially blaming the victim for drinking or for wearing short skirts. The only thing that causes a rape is a rapist. Why should her credibility be brought into question because she chose to go out and have a drink? Isn't that what the majority of young people do in our society? Is a girl not allowed to meet a man when she's out then? I mean, if she talks to a man out on a night, she must not be a very credible witness then. It's just ridiculous. This is the reason that many rapes go unreported. The Crown Prosecution Service prosecutes criminal cases that have been investigated by the police and other investigative organisations in England and Wales. The CPS is independent and they make their decisions independently of the police and the government. The role is to make sure that the right person is prosecuted for the right offence and to bring offenders for justice whenever possible. They decide which cases should be prosecuted. They determine the appropriate charges in more serious, complex cases and advise the police during the early stages of investigation. They then prepare cases and present them at court and provide information, assistance, support to victims and prosecution witnesses. Many survivors in the United Kingdom and Ireland and in the US have had negative experiences of the criminal justice system. Many also have positive experiences though, but certain key problems are flagged up time and time again. The first problem with the criminal justice system for survivors is that most never enter it in the first place. Sexual assault is the most unreported crime against the person. Over 80% of survivors never report their experience to the police. The reasons for this are often fear of disbelief, fear of unjustified blame, of retribution, of re-traumatisation, of the impact on their family and community, and of being let down by the system. Even when people do enter the criminal justice system, many leave it again. Survivors' first contact with police is well known to be a make or break stage. A 2006 study found that more than 80% of rape survivors without any advocacy support felt bad about themselves and reluctant to seek further help after their first contact with the police. Around 8% of cases reported to the police are taken to trial. Here, survivors face further challenges. As the psychologist Judith Herman noted, if one set out to intentionally design a system for provoking symptoms of traumatic stress, it would look very much like a court of law. Cross-examination is frequently cited as re-traumatising. In a court, it's the job of the defence to bring the prosecution's case into doubt. In sexual violence cases, the survivor's testimony may be the only evidence. This will therefore be the focus of their attack for the defence. This is typically done by undermining the survivor's credibility and reliability and their story's plausibility and consistency. Survivors may be accused of lies and of fabrication. Rape myths and stereotypes can be invoked. Detailed questioning can recreate the powerlessness and the terror of that original assault. This is referred to as secondary victimisation or the second rape. It can have serious consequences for the survivor's mental well-being and their mental health. Survivors have to deal with this while potentially suffering from the psychological consequences of experiencing the sexual violence in the first place. For example, rape is the most likely form to lead to post-traumatic stress disorder. People with PTSD will often try to avoid thoughts and feelings about the trauma. Yet survivors will be forced to address the trauma in excruciating detail in that court. PTSD is also associated with exaggerated feelings of blame, overly negative thoughts and assumptions about oneself, and difficulties with memory as well. Ironically, the psychological consequences of sexual violence can be what the defence uses to undermine the survivor's claims that they've experienced some type of sexual violence. After the incident, at least 89% of victims report some level of distress, including high rates of physical injury, post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, anxiety, substance misuse. 3/4 of victims experience significant social and emotional problems following an assault at work or school, with friends or with family. Around 58% of victims are injured in the assaults, suffering some form of combination of cuts, bruises, broken bones, internal injuries and rape injuries. More than a third of victims are injured badly enough to require treatment, typically in a hospital. As many as 82% of victims experience fear and anxiety, and between 12 and 40% are diagnosed with generalised anxiety, depending on the study that reports those particular details. Between 13 and 51% of victims are diagnosed with depression, and between 2 and 19% attempt suicide. I can cite study after study about the psychological effects of rape. However, that doesn't even begin to communicate what day-to-day living is like after being raped. I'm going to tell you in a survivor's own words what it's like being raped and following the incident. I was happy being allowed out to go out with my friends. I was going with a friend to a junior disco night at a local bar. No alcohol was being served, but we shared a drink on the way there. I was 15 at the time and I was having a great time, but then I started to feel sick. Maybe I'd drunk too much, but my friend wasn't that bad and we'd drunk exactly the same amount each. I was flirting with this older boy. He was 3 years older than me, so I was really flattered because he wanted to dance with me. He took me outside and we went to a car park to kiss. That was my first proper kiss. But then he pushed me down onto the floor. It was cold and gravelly and very uncomfortable. I remember him being on top of me and he pulled my skirt up and my knickers down. He tried to put his penis inside me, but it wouldn't go in. I don't remember much after that. I just remember going back in to get my friend and leaving. The next morning I woke up and I felt really ashamed. I was too young to even really know what rape was at the time. I said to my friend that I thought I'd had sex with him outside and that there was blood in my knickers. I'd never been with a man before that. I just remember being really shocked about it all. But I thought it was my own fault. I felt ashamed about what had happened. We never spoke about it again after that and just tried to carry on as normal. I started to hate myself for what had happened. How could I have been so disgusting with a boy I hardly knew? I didn't want him to do that to me and he was really heavy on top of me. I felt sick at the time and remember the smell of stale alcohol and stale tobacco and not being able to move. I was frightened and I felt helpless. I was watching the news about 30 years later and I was watching a report of a woman being raped on a college campus. There'd been a party and they'd been drinking and he took her outside and attacked and raped her. He just went home afterwards but was caught because of the CCTV footage. My heart started racing then. I felt sick. I felt like I had a ton weight sitting on my chest. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I couldn't do anything. I realised after all that time that I'd been raped that night. I did consent to him taking me outside to the car park. I consented to the kissing, but nothing else. Over the next few weeks, I remembered more and more detail. I would relive the event again and again in nightmares. At the lowest point, I was driving and I started having a panic attack. I just had to pull over. I couldn't see. I couldn't breathe. I thought I was going to die. Then I finally told somebody what had happened to me. And then I had counselling. I told the guy that I was dating at the time about me having a repressed memory and that I'd been raped at 15 and was remembering all of the details and getting help for it. His response was, "Oh great, how long will that take you to get over?" He felt as though he couldn't cope with having a girlfriend who'd been raped. I mean, what the hell? How was this his issue? And how could he ever be ashamed and disgusted that I'd been raped as a child? I'd developed a great hate for that man after that. I was still struggling with the thought that it was somehow my fault. I was the one who was drinking. I went outside with him. How could I have been so stupid? I got what I deserved. I wondered if I should prosecute now. But how would I tell the police that I'd waited 30 years to report it? They wouldn't believe me. I couldn't tell my family either. I was too ashamed. Plus, I knew that they would feel every ounce of anger and sadness and helplessness that I'd felt. They didn't deserve to go through that. I decided to just deal with it with my counsellor. And I'm happy to say that I'm doing really well now, but I do still have flashbacks. Plus, I learned that throughout my life, I'd come to resent men. I'd sabotaged some relationships and had put up with lots of other things that I should have walked away from. I just tried too hard. We women who've been raped are not victims. We're survivors. We've had to deal with everything that happens to us. We're not asked whether or not we're strong enough to cope with it. We're not asked how we'll wake up and deal with each day after the event. Together, we're stronger. We are survivors. I am a survivor. I hope that you do now have a better understanding of the psychological effects of rape. I hope that you've learned something from this video. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch it. Bye for now.